This is going to get me in trouble podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Hurl. Today I have Josh Hellbach with me. I'm actually the expert on this, but he's our guest idiot of the day. We're going to talk about SDRs. So Josh, why don't you start us off?
Hell of an intro. SDRs are special division.
Drawing rights.
Drawing rights. Thanks. I'm the guest idiot of the day, even though it's mine, but it's okay. You can co-opt it for now. So special drawing rights are essentially a way for banks to move money in between themselves from the World Bank to developing countries' banks, or from the Fed to the World Bank. It's just a way for banks to transact monetary funds. And an SDR is essentially a basket of different currencies. Right now, SDRs are 50% U.S. dollars. How much yen?
The Japanese yen is 8%.
8%.
The euro is 30%.
Yep.
The Chinese yuan is it's like 10%.
Yeah. And essentially why SDRs were created, I believe they were created at Bretton Woods in
1969.
Okay, Bretton Woods was in...
Bretton Woods.
Bretton Woods.
It was part of the Bretton Woods system, created in 1969.
I thought Bretton Woods was in 50s.
Correct.
Yeah, Bretton Woods was in the 50s. SDRs were then imposed almost 20 years later.
Via the IMF.
Yep, when the IMF was created.
In 1969.
And the IMF is the International Monetary Fund. So essentially, it's just a basket of currencies for banks to transact. It's not meant to be used for anything other than transacting from banks. So you can't just take like a dollar of SDRs and go out and purchase a pack of gum. It's a financial tool. It is not meant for consumables. So the reason you use SDRs, at least in their eyes, is to transfer funds from bank to bank and then use that to loan out money. And the reason you use a basket is because then it is less likely to see inflationary or deflationary events. So if the dollar is reduced, or the yen is reduced, or the euro is reduced, it doesn't reduce the SDR basket as much as just having one currency. So it's actually a very strong financial tool that banks use. And they've been very successful ever since they were started, because originally, before SDRs, especially after the World Wars, a lot of these countries were over-leveraged with their war funds, and they needed a way to be able to transact to rebuild Europe and other countries, and then also as a tool to invest in developing countries. So that's basically what an SDR is, for the most part, as we know it today.
Right. So I would say it in a different way, that there are not enough there's not enough collateral to justify the existence of U.S. dollars, Chinese yuan, Japanese. If you were to aggregate all the currencies of the world, they're insufficient because they each have their own risks.
Right.
And it's basically the same concept as in 2008, when they took multiple mortgages, multiple tranches, and diversified them, put them together into a fund or a security that was worth more than them separate.
Right, and then they colluded with the raters to give not so great tranches and not so great mortgages a higher rating, so that they'd be more appealing to the consumer.
Creditworthy.
More creditworthy.
Higher credit rating.
Yeah.
So in this
instance...
Well,
it wasn't really credit, because it was just an arbitrary number thrown on it. But anyway.
In this instance, you have a securitization, the security being the SDR, of multiple currencies, and it's really adding more currency into the world as we know. So the SDR, its collateral already exists.
Yep.
So it's as if I already give you a dollar, and you as the IMF could create a one SDR from the one U.S. dollar.
Right.
And you're able to use this
Yeah, and they use
as
it
the
as
same way as the dollar.
and then these banks use the SDRs as collateral to give out loans. Now,
Yes, you have a theory on this. So
yes.
what's your theory?
So my theory, and this has been backed up by more recent IMF documents that have come out, white papers, and Fed papers, along with the World Economic Forum. They put out quite a few papers in regards to having an international crypto that is based on the SDR system because it's been so successful over the past years. For the same reasons that banks use it, they want to turn it into a cryptocurrency. This cryptocurrency could be used across borders and would not be have the same negative effects that are seen with single currencies. For instance, the euro right now is almost entirely propped up by the German economy, and the German people, for instance, are living far below their means GDP-wise, whereas a lot of the money they give in to the UN is then used by countries like Greece and Italy, where their GDPs is significantly lower, and people for the GDP are actually living far beyond their means. And there's a lot of that's a very complicated issue, but with an SDR, what that does is it actually reduces the risk of the currency failing by one country screwing up, long story short, with their financial system.
So just go back a little bit and tell me what you mean. But you mentioned the euro.
Yep.
And you mentioned the SDR. So are you saying that the euro prevents one country from screwing up, or the SDR prevents one country from screwing
Well,
up?
currently the euro is a form of SDR.
It's similar to it.
It's similar to it, yeah.
It's an aggregate of many countries.
Exactly. Yes. Yep. And in that case, it's being used as a crutch.
Yeah.
For
some economies.
Yep. And I see the same issue. The same issue could arise with an SDR.
Yeah.
But
so there's
I
a
think
difference with the SDR.
Right. There is differences, but the pros of the SDRs outweigh the cons, which is why you have a lot of these massive international financial communities, IMF, World Bank, Fed, looking into it as a international currency. So
let me stop you. What's different about the SDR is that first of all, there's a basket of currencies that are already traded, so they have values. They can also be rebalanced. So the U.S. dollar, it currently having being 42% of the backing of an SDR, could go down in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's reclassed every 5 years. So if the Chinese yuan is very strong, it could be reclassed higher to a higher percentage of the total basket in 5 years. Another mechanism that the SDR has that the euro does not is that the SDR it's basically it's the equivalent of the dollar to the Federal Reserve. An SDR to the IMF is equivalent to the dollar to the Federal Reserve, where the SDR is a note of the IMF.
Right.
And there is an interest rate that it corresponds to the U.S. dollar, and that is the U.S. Treasury.
Right, but my point is that SDRs are a more secure financial tool, or a more secure monetary system than any one currency.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that the reclassing mechanism and the interest rate that the IMF or the IMF will charge will credit to, will debit to borrowing countries and credit to basically saving countries, countries that are saving, is another mechanism that penalizes inflation.
Yep.
So whereas right now currencies are all floating in the sky with really no peg.
Right.
No peg to anything.
Since we went off the gold standard.
What the SDR does is it says, okay, everybody's flying in the sky, but we're going to keep track of where you're flying relative to others in the sky. So it grounds currencies together.
Yes.
And two mechanisms that the SDR
right. And who
has that strength
and who in this system will be controlling where those countries are rated at?
So the IMF.
Yeah.
But and the IMF is a U.S. institution.
Yep.
However, I believe there is input from multiple countries on this.
Yes, there's input from multiple countries, yes. And then also the World Economic Forum is pretty heavily involved, and the Fed is very heavily involved, considering the Fed and the IMF work fairly closely together, and a lot of the execs at the IMF and the Fed, they flip-flop back and forth. I believe Janet Yellen actually worked for the IMF for a little while, and now she's the head of the Fed.
She's the head of the Treasury.
Head of the Treasury.
She was the head of the Fed.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Janet Yellen's actually an interesting case study on this because a lot of
she gave a speech to Citadel.
Yes. Yeah. So Janet Yellen's an interesting case here
2 years ago
because she was the head of the Treasury, the head of the Fed, and then also a member of the IMF. I believe she had a leadership role, but don't quote me on that. And there are many different bureaucrats like her that bounce in between, and we're made to believe that these institutions are completely separate from each other, when in reality, the same people, they all run in the same circles, they all work very closely, and they more often than not collude, which is why we got interested in SDRs in different reasons. You talked to me about it, and I was actually looking more on the international, a new international monetary system in regards to the Agenda 2030 put out by the World Economic Forum in Davos, and then also there was a few other white papers put out by the IMF and Davos that were talking about moving away from having sovereign monetary funds and moving towards having crypto SDRs for the reasons we've previously stated. Giving up control from these countries that have their own monetary systems into a more conglomerated world currency system controlled by these international conglomerates and corporations. Long story short, because a lot of these, like for instance, the IMF and Davos are very connected with these massive corporations that we all know and use very often. And I am very, very concerned about it because freedom and money are intertwined more than anything else. If you are separate from the monetary system and you do not need, if you are making a paycheck instead of working for it, making a paycheck on your own and working for a paycheck are two very different things, and one leads to freedom and the other leads to essentially a slavery. If you are going in, school teacher, whatever, you're working for a paycheck, you are part of the system, you're part of the machine, and if you are making something, if you're an actual producer, you are outside of that system. The U.S. was founded on that very principle that we should allow people to have freedom and sovereign money. Sovereign money essentially being gold, silver, actual assets. That's what this country was founded upon. And we got off of that with Nixon in the 70s. In the 70s?
71.
71.
And you could even argue with Woodrow Wilson in 1913 with the Federal Reserve.
Yep. That's another interesting fact. So the Federal Reserve and the IRS were made same year, 1913. That's a whole nother case study. That's very interesting, but I'm very pro-freedom, and there's a lot going on in our society right now that is pulling those freedoms away from us, and it all starts at money. And whether you like money or hate money, if you don't care about it, you will be part of the system, and you will be controlled by it. If you are not a sovereign monetary citizen, then you will be a slave to the system to get that check to be able to buy the things you need. Freedom can only be purchased with money. If you don't have money, you can't have freedom, because you're going to need to buy things. You're going to need to have some form of transaction between other people. And there's a whole movement right now that's very pro-authoritarian, and that is very much looking for security and at the cost of freedom. And then on the other side of this, you have freedom. And in that freedom movement, I believe the core is having sovereign money. And the SDRs really play into the World Economic Forum's Agenda 2030, which basically states you will have nothing, you will own nothing, and you will be happy. We will take care of you. If you give us your freedom and your free will, we will give you everything you need because we're smarter than you and we can take care of you.
So, okay, that was good. Let's regroup here. So, how does the SDR relate to the lack of sovereignty in money?
Because the SDRs, so crypto and the crypto heads that started out in the early 2020s, started basically around 2010 when Bitcoin came out, they saw this problem arising where, especially after 2008, we were just like, hey, our system's broken. Money isn't what it used to be. Our buying power is reduced. We need a new form of money that is completely separate from not only the government, but any one individual determining its price and purchasing power. Because if you can print money at any rate you want, you will reduce the buying power of that currency. So they created these cryptocurrencies that are completely separate from any form of governance, government or individual pressure. Wait. And that money can, so here's the thing with money. Since we're talking about money, there's 4 things that make money money, right? First off, it has to be rare, right? Because it has to be a wanted, right? Like gold's a perfect example. It's rare, it's untarnishable, because it doesn't, you can throw it in the ground, it'll be worth the same it is now. It has to be easily transportable. You can't, take it can't weigh a lot to be able to move around, and it has to be universally accepted, right? So those are the 4 things. Gold is awesome. It's God's money, like Robert Kiyosaki says. Paper is man's money. Well, yeah, man's money, I guess. It's really shitty man's money. And then crypto has yet to be determined, but ultimately, I believe it will be the people's money, because it's completely separate from any form of governance and is completely decentralized. Decentralized finance is the only path I see to individual freedom. Because as long as money is around and it's controlled by a central bank or government, you will always be part of their system, not your own system.
Right.
Now, the IMF and the World Bank and these massive conglomerates see the efficacy and the genius behind crypto, because you can take it anywhere in the world. It's completely accepted. It's perfect money in a modern age. And they want to get in on that because they see the same things we see when we're looking at Ethereum, Bitcoin, Cardano, whatever. And it's just simply better. It's easier to use. Everyone's got their phone. It is far easier to transact between one another. It doesn't get dirty. It doesn't carry viruses. It doesn't weigh a lot like gold. And it's easily divisible, which was the biggest issue with gold. It's not easily divisible. So, because of that, you have these authoritarians that are seeking control. And the best way to get control out of any population is to control the money supply and control the monetary currency. Control the currency. Whatever.
Right. So my question for you, Josh, is these decentralized cryptocurrencies. If I want to buy a house, then
Well, that's why the SDRs are amazing.
okay.
So that goes
How am I
back.
going to get a loan
You don't need it.
for a house?
You don't need it.
Okay, go for it.
So with Bitcoin and then also with SDRs, and this is true for all cryptos, you can become your own banker. So say I have, we'll use Bitcoin as an example. Say I own $5 million in Bitcoin, right? And I want to leave it there. I'm not going to invest in anything. I want to keep it in Bitcoin because I think it's going to go up. But I also want to make a percentage on it. So me, sovereign citizen, I know Mitch. Mitch knows me. I trust Mitch. I trust the investment. I loan the money to Mitch to buy the house. And then that money is then returned to me through with interest through Mitch's loan.
So this is how banks work.
Yes, but
This
you'll
is how
become your
banks
own bank and it'll be completely electronic based. Now,
I
the
see.
same thing can be true for SDRs, except with SDRs, it's not person to person. No, with SDRs and an international cryptocurrency, that would be coming from the bank. And that gets into the international credit score, which we see in China right now. The Chinese social credit score system is based on your devotion to the Communist Party. You cannot get a house if you're a dissenter. You cannot get a car loan if you're a dissenter. If you're a good little slave, on the other hand, you can get any
23
loan you
million
want.
people, I believe, are unable to go on a train or fly in a plane.
Yes, and why is that?
Well, they did something to piss the government off.
Right, and
I don't know what it was.
and they do not have sovereign money over there. You can't just be you can't just be a ghost and go on a train over there like you can here. Give the conductor, is that the name of the train person?
Right, right.
Conductor, engineer, whatever. $5 to go from Baltimore to DC. Over there, it's completely crypto based on that credit score. Now, the globalists, who we'll just say it, globalists control a lot of these massive conglomerates. IMF, Fed, Davos, obviously, that's where they meet, and the World Economic Forum. They have been using China as a microcosm of what they want to do for the rest of the world since the late 50s. They really picked out China as a great place because of their culture and because they were a developing country at that time to implement a lot of the ideas that they saw as being problems out of World War II. They have used it for the past 70 years as a trial run for all of their ideas, some being great and some being poor. Now, granted, Communist Revolution and Mao threw a little bit of a chink in that plan because it's not exactly what they want, but it's still a great place for them to test out these ideas on the monetary system that they want to implement in the rest of the world.
Sure. So let me just respond to everything you just said. I don't think that cryptocurrency or decentralized cryptocurrencies will take over the roles that banks play, the roles that the U.S. government, the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, in their printing of dollars, the regulation of the currency. Legal tender. I think all of these things stay in the hands of the very people that have it right now.
Yeah.
And what will happen, possibly, the most plausible thing that will happen is that the decentralized cryptocurrencies will force will force the current players to conform to a more sovereign money. We're still going to get a digital coin from the Federal Reserve, digital currency.
Yeah, Fed coin.
We're still going to get SDRs. Everything's still going to happen.
Yeah.
But if more people start using the decentralized cryptocurrencies, they'll have to make concessions in what type of controls they have, and how they manage the Fed coin, the SDR.
Right. It's
The
very.
decentralized cryptocurrencies will never win.
I
They'll
disagree.
be used. They'll be used.
Okay. Well,
They'll
I
never
think
they'll never be.
this goes
it,
back to my original point where there's two very separate groups that are in this world, and they're not based on political lines. They're based on more so lifestyle lines and moral lines. And you have the one side, like I said before, that's pro freedom, and you have the other side that's pro safety. That's really what it comes down to.
Yes,
And
I would agree.
the pro safety side will always call to the authoritarian safe bet. All right, I'm gonna trade in my money that has been inflated by massive money printing here in the U.S. to a Fed coin that is, for instance, I mean, here's the thing: we know they want to move to a Fed coin. Yes. The only way that they're going to be able to get people to do that and get their money out of dollars is
making it attractive.
Is to make it attractive. So okay, your dollar,
right.
We'll give you $1.20 for every dollar you give into us, and then you go into their system, and that's universally accepted in the U.S. and abroad because you can tie it into an SDR, and it's going to be very simple and very easy to cross borders with that, and it's completely tracked. And then on the opposite side of that, you will have the DeFi crowd and the pro freedom crowd that is going to be kind of a gray market of goods and services that can only be purchased through, very similar to the black market right now.
Right.
That you can only buy certain things on the black market that with Cardano or Monero. And I see, we've already seen it. We see this massive fission in the populations of the world. That one believes that there are certain things you can own and certain things you can't own, and if you own certain things like guns, they should either be taken from you or you should be cast out of society for owning them. And I'm just using that as an example because it's the first thing I could think of. And then you have the other side that's pro freedom. It's like, I have my money, I can own what I want, I can own when I want, as long as I'm not hurting anybody else. I want to be able to have these things. And those two separate mindsets are going to lead to two very separate monetary systems. Now, this monetary system, the pro-security
the pro-safety monetary system,
they probably won't dabble in all this DeFi stuff.
Will persist and will be necessary.
Yes.
As a pro-freedom,
yep.
On the pro-freedom side, we're not only going to be able to operate in the decentralized cryptocurrency.
Yep. We'll probably operate in both.
Plane. We have to, yes. The pro-safety they only need to operate in the pro-safety, the Fed coin. And so that's the difference here.
Yes.
The decentralized crypto will never be the winner.
No. I'm not saying it's going to win. I'm saying it is, for those of you that are pro-freedom and pro-financial security, the DeFi system is going to have to be adopted. So if you don't know what it is now and you want to keep your freedoms, you're going to have to understand it, because these international SDRs and these Fed-based coins are coming, and they will control your life through it. So understand how to break away from that and have finances in this alternate system where you can actually be a free individual and do what you want, because best believe the pro-security side will only become more authoritarian over time. It'll be very easy to get into. It'll be very attractive. It's going to be very shiny, especially with when they implement it. They're not going to implement it in the good times. They're going to implement it in the bad, when there's international hyperinflation or international inflation and they want to move to a new currency. They're going to move to that new currency. They'll give you something, a little bonus. Maybe they'll take away your student debt. Maybe they'll pay your mortgage for a little while. They'll make it very sweet, and you'll get hooked by it. And before you know it, There will be certain things you can buy and certain things you can't buy. If you buy beer and pizza, this is actually in an IMF document. If you buy beer and pizza, you will have a lower credit score than if you buy seltzer water and broccoli. All right? They are going to use it to control people. And you need to understand how much money controls your life and how much they can capitalize on that to make you do what they want you to do.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't have a lot more to add.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. This might get us in trouble. I'm Josh Hellbach, your host, and this is Mitchell Hurl, my
Yes. Guest idiot.
guest idiot.